All right, good morning. Thank you, Kirsten. Appreciate the introduction and the opportunity today. We're here with Vince Sritapan from DHS CISA. Good morning, Vince.
Morning.
Along with me is JT Keating from our marketing organization Ads Imperium as well. Hey, good morning, JT.
Morning, Jim. Good morning, Vince. Great to see you again.
So for our audience, Vince, if you don't mind, maybe just frame up the organization, who you're with, the mission, the role, what does the organization look like from a workforce perspective, kind of high-level thoughts and themes going into calendar year 22 and how things are going for you over there.
Yeah, so I'm actually a section chief for service innovation within Cyber Quality Service Management Office, also known as QSMO. A lot of the places here and sort of how I've come over to CISA now has really been around one in the area of starting new mobile cybersecurity shared services, which we can talk more about in this opportunity here, but also it's all the new projects that may be a shared service in cyber, right? Specific to supporting FSEB agencies, federal civilian executive branch agencies. So as you look at how do we do in designated services such as a vulnerability disclosure platform, right? You saw the hack DHS, right? That's actually running off that platform that we have within CyberQSMO, all the way to things like protective DNS and how we do that going forward, even how we may do that for mobile in the future, because any asset that you put it on, not only your laptops, but what about the phone or the smart tablet and things of that nature. I'll note that for us, Cyber Quality Service Management Office has designated areas that we work in, VDP, protective DNS, security operations services, but we look at the broader set of cybersecurity shared services that we can provide really on a voluntary basis to FSEB agencies. I'll note that the idea is around centralizing standardization, security, visibility, looking at high quality cyber services and capabilities that really go after what the FSEB equities are, right? It's not just because CISA said so, or we want to see what you have to show. Nah, there's a lot more there in also caring for what FSEB agencies really need and want for their mission. So my background, as some may know, is in the mobile space probably for the last decade, whether it's various NISP standard pubs or the Federal Mobility Group that I co-chair with GSA and NIST, and then just a lot of opportunities there. But noting we're going into, in sort of where I sit now, into service innovation or innovation management, any new cybersecurity shared services, not only designated, but in the future, what that holds for FSEB agencies. But yeah, so that's sort of my background, and hopefully
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. And Vince, I'll give you some more time later to talk about some of the outputs that you guys have had. Quite frankly, really strong documents. The ATARC mobile ecosystem security white paper was recently released. You all also released the international travel guidance document, very powerful document there to understand the risks associated with OCONUS travel. I'd argue that there's some of those same risks here in CONUS, but certainly OCONUS when it becomes even more treacherous out there. Awesome, so appreciate that introduction. So obviously top of mind for a lot of folks around the Beltway is the Potus executive order. I was wondering if you can share some of your thoughts on that. A great baseline of it or backbone of it, of course, is zero trust. So nobody can go anywhere in the cyber world and federal these days without talking about zero trust. We'll certainly do that today, but would like it if you could share your thoughts on the executive order.
Yeah, so with the executive order, and you'll see a lot of the work, it's actually CISA and OMB. I actually know Sean Connolly, John Sims on our side within CISA working on a lot of that documentation there, even looking at, technical reference architectures that support it, right, for cloud security. I'll note that it is very much a maturity, process and model that people face. If you look at that, you're talking about enterprise security architecture, really using zero trust concepts, right, for the organizational infrastructure and workflows. The pillars that you'll find within that document include everything from identity, device, network environment, application workload, and data. And you'll see there's a lot of commonalities, right? There's sort of cross-cutting capabilities of visibility and analytics, automation, orchestration, and governance. What you'll see, because you'll see, oh, well, NIST has a document too, and so does NSA and others, where this governance piece is what's pulled out and sort of what's different. I'll note, though, that when you look at that and what's there, most folks look at zero trust, and the first thing they're going to come to mind is either how do I apply this to my traditional IT infrastructure, my desktop, my laptop, and then, oh, well, what about cloud, right? With the whole SolarWinds and other aspects that have occurred more recently, various incidents. You're seeing, hey, now what about how am I applying it to cloud? The question comes for in more opportune for this discussion is, now what do we do for that in mobile, right? How are we even accounting for those things? So I would argue that it's about time that we do focus on it, right? And that when we look at zero trust and look at enterprise IT assets and any endpoint, that it would include mobile assets. I'll also note, though, if you look at the cyber EO, and not to veer off too far, because with zero trust in section 4, section 8 actually has logging requirements, right? So if you focus in on what was pushed there, and I'll just focus on mobile, especially for this panel, is that you'll see both things like that you get from your MDM or EMM solution, mobile device manager, enterprise mobility management solution, and mobile threat defense, right? So really two classes of technologies there. And think of MTD as like your others as the endpoint protection. The MDM is that configuration management, policy enforcement, and remediation. But how do you know that something bad happened? You have the MTD piece for endpoint protection. I think that combination and that logging, right? So, how do I capture those logs? Are the logs even turned on, right, for the first period? And then how do I export it in the event something bad occurs? You'll see this, and it's going to take time. I think it's like an 18-month window, if I'm not mistaken, of how we get to maturity, where, okay, great, something bad did occur. Now you can share that with CISA and others. So if people look closely, within that cyber executive order, moving towards zero trust or accounting for mobility, I think is an area that we can improve upon. It's a great opportunity, and in the logging requirements, it's actually built in there. So
that's a perfect, I think, segue to a practical use case that we see every day in government in particular, and that is the usage of O365. I'll ask JT to weigh in here from a recent Gartner Security and Risk Summit just a couple of months ago. JT, would you mind giving us some context around what was discussed in that event, or at that event, relative to O365 usage and the notion of conditional access?
Yeah, perfect. And Vince, it's got to be for Vince. I mean, he's been in and around the mobile world, for quite some time, and the market has finally caught up to him. I mean, he's been, Vince, I've known you for over 5 years talking about it. You were doing it well before that. So, it's got to be kind of feeling good that, in a weird way, that it's actually catching up. But I do agree with what Vince was talking about. Obviously, you need some ability to detect the threats and the risks, et cetera. And then as it pertains to the O365 use case, which is a variation of zero trust, and I'll explain what I mean by that. At the Gartner Security Summit, there were two notable conversations that occurred, both of which, independent of each other, confirm the exact same point. And that exact same point is what Vince was just talking about, which is, if you're putting O365 out there, just as an example, and our study has actually shown that well over 80% of organizations have enabled O365 on mobile. Whether it's corporate or agency provided, or whether it's personally provided, especially with the pandemic, at a minimum, people were given access to O365 and Outlook and Teams at a minimum. And so you've got this data out there. What are you doing to protect it? And just like a traditional endpoint. So Gartner's lead analyst for mobile threat defense from the Gartner technical professional side, which is the technical guys. They're the guys that actually take stuff in and break it, right? It's a gentleman named Patrick Hevesy. He's been doing this for quite some time. Patrick Hevesy was doing a session on securing O365. It wasn't on mobile, it was securing O365. But when he went to the mobile use case, he said emphatically, if you have O365 on mobile, you must have mobile threat defense. So you must have some ability to have the logging, some ability to have visibility on O365. So that was kind of in one bucket. Another bucket was a customer panel that our CEO, Sridhar Mittal, hosted with 4 of our customers: JP Morgan Chase, TikTok, and the gentleman from TikTok used to be at HSBC, Danaher and Medtronic. And in that session, when they talked about O365, particularly Danaher and the gentleman from TikTok/HSBC said the same thing. And what was interesting from the Danaher perspective, she said, we don't even try to think about corporate versus personal. We basically say, let's assume they're all personal. And so they're saying you have to have MTD, you have to be able to know whether they're at risk. Where the conditional access part comes in and how it ties into zero trust, and we were talking, Vince and I were talking about this beforehand, is it's in this particular case, Vince mentioned MDM and EMMs. Well, all of those things are now under unified endpoint management. Like if you go to Gartner, the Magic Quadrant is unified endpoint management. Another element of that stack is mobile application management. Mobile application management, let's say in particular when it comes to O365 with Intune or Endpoint Manager from Microsoft, well, the way that it's configured now is for people that are enabling access, instead of trying to manage the whole device, this is what Danaher, HSBC, et cetera, instead of trying to manage the whole device, what they're saying is we're going to manage access to the app. So, zero trust at the highest level includes, I'm going to assess your identity and decide what you're supposed to have access to. I'm going to assess the risk posture of the environment you're on. And on the fly, I'm going to make a decision what I'm going to give you access to, right? In this particular case, you got obviously AAD, Active Directory from Microsoft. You would have an MTD solution assessing the risk of that device. And so if you come into Outlook and you're on a bad Wi-Fi, Outlook will deny you access. And they'll say, no, until you get off that Wi-Fi, you don't get your email, right? Or if it's your phone has been jailbroken or rooted, or you don't get access. So they're not managing the whole device. They're moving to managing access to the apps, which is identical, in particular in our case, to what we're doing with Ping in a pure zero trust case. It just happens to be the how is MAM in this case versus working with a Ping in another case, but fundamentally it's the same thing. You need to be able to detect the risk posture of the device, particularly against, and from a corporate or an agency standpoint, particularly against 0 days, because we have to assume it's not stuff that everybody has seen. You need to be able to assess something that is unique and potentially even nation state in terms of what you're doing and make a decision on the fly. So those two totally independent groups were confirming the same thing that Vince has been talking about for quite some time, particularly as it pertained to this one use case of O365.
Yeah, and Vince, I'll just ask you, I think some of this surfaces in context to those documents that I mentioned earlier that you recently released as part of your role with the FMG, and then obviously in support of ATARC and the working groups on the security side. But I think it amplifies that notion that even Director Easterly was mentioning not too long ago in a fireside chat talk about how everything is interconnected and understanding the risk posture, but also identifying, what are the capacities that exist to know what normal looks like, right? What does good look like in the context of 0 day? And so I was curious for your thoughts on how you, kind of bring that together in terms of a practical use case, like JT was just talking about with respect to using O365 on a daily basis, where we're always working, checking our calendar, checking our email, and then behind the scenes, how that zero trust comes into play, how the 0 day attack device attestation, if you will, comes into play. Again, all of it relative to what you're seeing in your role.
Yeah, so I don't think we take the whole time just talking about mobile zero trust. Actually, CISA internally is working on a public document that's out for interagency review now, looking at applying zero trust principles to enterprise mobility. And the concept here is to leverage existing enterprise mobile security technologies and management capabilities to actually meet zero trust and sort of mature that over time. I'll note that, the concepts are the principles are the same in ZT, right? So the never trust, always verify type of thing. No implicit trust, protect those resources independent of network location, limit access to what, when it's needed, and look for anomalous, malicious activity. Always having full security monitoring, looking at continuous authentication, right? Assume that the device is already compromised. It's a hostile environment. It's those key tenets that you say, hey, this is just how we envision the environment, and this is how we operate. When you look at that though, and then you say, hey, I want to apply this to mobile, right? You're going to find that, yeah, you can still look at identity, device, network environment, application workload, and data, but the mobile security technologies you apply, whether it's, you say, device management, user device authentication, any kind of hardware attestation or ancillary controls that you have within the device for identity, there's ways to do this so you can have it in a continuous fashion. When it comes to other aspects of, hey, what you have, right? You know what's on the device. So hardware, software, asset management. But then the other aspects of, well, are you looking at the security posture of that device continuously, right? The behavior of it, where it goes. So, knowing what you have and then being able to protect it, and then how we implement it, it gets a lot harder in the architecture, because you have to look at, well, it's not just about the technologies, it's about how I configure and manage it. I know just in our partnerships with Federal Mobility Group and others, the NIST NCCOE, National Cybersecurity Center for Excellence, has a zero trust build, and they're looking at mobile. Gemma Howell, who co-chairs Federal Mobility Group, and others like Maruja and from NIST are actually looking in those areas to build it and show guidance. What we're looking at within CISA, at least the initial steps, is, well, how can we give you initial guidance to show you can use existing technologies? There's no, just to be clear, if any vendor says, and well, we don't support any vendor in more classes of technology, but if any vendor says, here's my zero trust technology and it's the silver bullet for all things, whether traditional IT or mobile, I'll be like, yeah, no, I probably wouldn't buy that stock. But, what I would say though is that, there are existing technologies, even in mobile, right? I'll say it's different architecture. If you think about your traditional laptop and desktop, how we control what applications you put on there, how we have trusted internet connection for federal government, right? Think about always on VPN and other aspects of the architecture. In mobile, it's different. We have sandboxing and different methods. We can use gate technology to support continuous authentication. It's built differently, right? It's inherently different in mobile. And that's why when you see a lot of pieces, you see that, hey, an iOS and Android, full mobile operating system is mobile technology. When I start to go into the Windows and OS, and I know with iOS there's that convergence, but until that happens, you're seeing that the tools that we have available are distinctly different on how we protect an endpoint. So I'll say that with the zero trust and how we achieve that, I'll say, yeah, I mean, it's the core tenets I've been talking about before, but now applied differently to meet zero trust and the maturity that's there. But your MDM or EMM, UEM, whatever you want to call that, right? For hardware and software asset management, your ability to also, configure, do policy enforcement, and then remediate, right? But remediate once you have information from things like an MTD or a mobile application vetting. But the tenets around identity, the device, the network, application workload, data, and how we orchestrate that across. But you'll find MDM is still necessary to a certain extent. And if not, you're saying it's a subset of EMM, which is MAM, right? That you'll have there. But mobile threat defense, like to say, hey, I don't want to protect the asset, take known malware, forget 0 days one aspect, but take known malware and compromise the device, and you think your EMM is going to protect you. I mean, that's a sort of longer term, older mentality, long time ago, that people didn't know the difference. But now, knowing what I have, being able to protect it, those are key aspects and just tenets of basics. I mean, with whether zero trust or not. I think that the other aspects of the user, the device, and sort of not trusting anything and looking at everything as a resource, and how we sort of do things like conditional access and whatnot. But notably, it still goes back to the data, right? If the data itself is sensitive, well, then I have to protect it, right? And regardless of where it sits, in the cloud, on a laptop, in a smartphone, but how we pull that off, leveraging existing, in this case, mobile security technologies, is key and important. So definitely looking forward to provide more information. You'll see a lot of the federal mobility group efforts that we've done, right? The mobile security ecosystem, trying to put all those pieces together and show, hey, this is the realm of the possible, right? You get various, whether it's operating system vendors or OEMs to, mobile security technologies, argue over different pieces. For us, it's not about, hey, one solution is better than the other. This is what's out there today, and how you configure it to meet zero trust is sort of what we're looking at as guidance within CISA. So.
Vince, along those lines, I heard in there, and JT, I think, mentioned it as well, the notion of BYOD, different phraseology. I think the DoD is choosing a path of BYOAD, the A standing for approved. So bring your own approved device. What are your thoughts, just broad strokes, on BYOD? And
yeah,
are Fed Civ agencies kind of following that path as well, or what can you tell us there?
So I'm biased, so maybe it's just I'm old school and cyber in that regard. It's security oriented, but I will say, it's not a technology or security question when it comes to BYOD. The technology security is there, as you heard over time about, hey, it's more of a policy and HR, and I got to deal with unions and privacy. Like, those are the things that I just like, hey, I don't want to touch that. That's a problem. I will note, though, from a security perspective, and I know this because I co-chaired the CNSS mobile and wireless security working group internal to government. So think about the policies that are around and directives for mobile devices, right? You think about this is solid state media, right? And so there's policy in CNSS P17 that says if you do classified spillage, right? I have work email that it happens. It's no fault of anyone in particular, but it happens. According to that, if it's solid state media, it's not like I can do a DBAN, sort of zeroization or a approved method for wiping. It's classified in this case, and for solid state media, the policy is to crush the device at the end of its life. Right. So, and there's no, oh, I'm going to pay you for the device I took for your personal device. I think that the BYO, approved device, bring your own pieces are there. Some agencies do it. If you're doing it from I saved money perspective, I'd say look again and look harder. If you're doing it for like user convenience, or just this is because I know some folks who says, hey, we share a device, right? Where it's there at an airport or other pieces. The shift workers are moving in and out for that, specialized device set up for that mission purpose. So I think BYOD is in government. We do have the metrics that show the collection of that. You could see that in some of the older FISMA metrics there. GFE versus BYOD. I will say the majority of government still is on the GFE because you can control it. There are some people who've gotten work with their legal and HR and others to figure out how we can do this. But a lot of the larger agencies haven't gone that route. Most folks still, have the GFE device, and at the end of the day, I still think you need to protect it. Like it's about the data, right? It's not about the device itself. And so what we can put on the device and how we can ensure, because think about it. I mean, it might be a little different because of COVID, where now your laptop's on all the time and plugged in and your battery life keeps dying. But in mobile, I mean, this is something that is always on traditionally, that has a microphone to listen in, that can do geolocation and tracking, has access to sensitive data, whether you say O365, other databases and applications we have. I mean, this is a pretty powerful device, right? The laptop, it's traditionally, or desktop, is not always on. It's not always with you, but your mobile phone is. Right. So you got to think about the attack surface that's there, the data that's there, and how you do your best to protect it, whether BYOD or a person, GFE.
You mentioned it's always with you. I made a comment in the Zero Trust Lab series that ATARC has been sponsoring, and I said, hey, an exercise to try, if you're so daring, is to take your mobile device or mobile devices, in the case of, government folks often have multiple, take them and put them in another room, close the door, walk away, and continue about your day, and track how much time goes by before anxiety starts to set in, right? Or before you start, where did I put my device, right? So I think that's a relevant observation to the fact that the mobile is always with us. But anyway, JT, you had a comment, and then I did want to circle back. I had two more thoughts or two more questions.
I was gonna piggyback off of what Vince was just talking about, just to highlight an interesting point. You're spot on, Vince, that these things are with us all the time, and there's capabilities and that they have that are unique to proximity, right? One of the things that I think has been pretty interesting is there's a lot of people that hear about Pegasus, for instance, right? And they're like, well, I'm not high enough profile to have somebody use something that is that well known, to spend that much time looking at vulnerabilities and zero clicks and everything in order to get on my device. And it's just not happening. Okay, that's fine. We discovered a couple months ago, happened to be in South Korea, a capability, and we dubbed it Flytrap, just because we got to name it because it's fun, which is kind of weird for us machine learning guys, because machine learning guys usually don't get to name anything. They just stop things, But the thing that was unique about Flytrap and scary about Flytrap is it basically enabled the exact same capabilities as sophisticated software like Pegasus using off-the-shelf software. So it didn't capitalize on some elaborate vulnerability or anything. It capitalized on social engineering, which we all know is probably the greatest vulnerability in any organization, to just get people to install an app and then elevate some privileges. But the point of it for me, the thing that was a little bit daunting about it was the fact that it was literally almost open source, that it wasn't a highly sophisticated organization, and it enabled the same sorts of capabilities that Vince was talking about that we have to be concerned about. So I was just putting those pieces together and just wanted to throw that out as just yet another data point.
Yeah, and I'll note, like, even if you can't convince, maybe leadership to buy into, hey, I need to protect my enterprise or my data for the mission. Well, what about the people, right? I'll tell you, common traits of SMSing, right? Phishing via text message and others are still there, right? Whether that's more for like, monetary, gain, right? They're trying to trick you, and I get it. Shoot, we have new employees that get it. It's like, oh, is this a GFE device? Yeah, it's all the same. The numbers are recycled and used throughout the various carriers. But the truth is, you're going to get these. Oh, hey, we noticed an unauthorized, whatever for what X bank, and then therefore please click on this link, and it looks just like the bank website, but you're putting in all your info. This happens to all ages. Doesn't matter that older, younger, whatever. People say, hey, well, it's my banking, I really care. Or it's the, hey, I want that gift card piece, which is maybe not as likely for people to click on. But those things are there. So having an endpoint protection that filters that, can use machine learning on the back end, right, to be able to say, hey, and then do something about it, block it, right? Even if you didn't have an EMM or MDM of sorts, but you had just MTD, the ability and the APIs available allow you to do network proxying so that they don't go through, right? Myself, my mom, whomever in the family clicks on that and then goes out. So you'll be surprised. Like, if you don't do it for the mission, then do it for the people, right? Yeah. There's aspects of being able to protect that device that is integral to our everyday lives that people just don't realize. So
yeah, apparently I still have a package sitting at FedEx that I need to click on. I haven't gotten to it yet, but it's apparently there for me. I got that this morning. So
no doubt. Hey, Vince, just a couple more things. I know we're trying to be conscious of time here too. So I think we talked a little bit about applications, or several times we certainly talked about data. Relative to the applications, obviously we use our mobile device for a great many of things, applications being one. I know you had mentioned mobile application vetting, so typically associated with, hey, before you launch your application into the wild, let's do a scan, make sure everything's legit, the code, the binaries, et cetera. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what you're doing in that space? And then what we're also seeing is that's only part of sort of the the protective posture. There's also, well, once that application is running in the wild, then what, right? What happens potentially downstream? And I know JT will probably have some comments on that, but if you could start, maybe just frame up a little bit of what MAV is and kind of what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so mobile application vetting, various vendors do that today. You're looking at both static and dynamic analysis of the app itself. In this case, my recommendation is use binary, don't use source code. And the reason for that comes down to like intellectual property issues, right? I know some people are like, oh, well, we could do it with your source code. I'm like, yeah, and then someone says you stole their source code and went to reuse it. That's a problem. When you do it with binary, compiled code, it's a lot less risk and less risk, at least for CISA and some other agencies, right? But notably, there's two aspects. There's applications that are compiled that you use from the official stores or unofficial stores, third-party apps that you get to put on your mission enterprise device, right? Even personal device. That's one aspect of applications that pose risk. There's another one we're also looking into is what about government developed mobile apps, right? And what are the policies out there today that says thou shalt ensure that your mobile app is secure and has security and privacy considerations. And so what we're looking in mobile application vetting is in both cases, right? And using static dynamic analysis. We've partnered with NSA before, even before I even joined CISA and some of my older projects using research to say, hey, well, can you do things like the NIAP protection profile version 1.3 for mobile app vetting? The criteria they have for iOS and Android, can you do it in such a way that it's an automated fashion, that it doesn't require 60 man hours for one mobile app for every version that changes? I've seen that in some of my partnerships with DOD and some others and that's a long time ago. That's probably not today, but historically that was some of the problems that existed, right? And it's just not tenable. How many tens of thousands of mobile apps, unique mobile apps that are on our government enterprise devices today? That's a lot. And I'm not talking about the even more from the official stores. I'm just talking about what we download, users put on the device, right? So I'll just note that we're looking at standing up a service or capability, right, that CISA pays for, and we're looking at, quality, scalability, standardization for security and visibility, so that agencies, if you develop a mobile app, right, you can put it through our capability and service, and just CISA mobile app vetting, or if you have apps that you want to consume, you can do that. I think this is complementary to the various mobile security technologies like EMM, MDM, MAM, whatever, to do the endpoint, mobile threat defense. I think all that in concert is what helps you really push forward to meet closer to zero trust and other aspects, just fuller comprehensive security overall, right? So that's what we're doing in the mobile application space. But I will say one area, just as you talk about, like we're building cybersecurity shared service, awesome. But the question is, what makes it mandatory? Like, why do you have to secure it? And where is the listing? If you go look at in government, is there any one place? I do know of a website that has some information. There's only 24 apps on there. Guarantee you there's more than 24 mobile apps in government today. But the question becomes, not including, commercial solutions for classified and those requirements, right? But in the regular federal government, what makes mobile security, in this case, application development and others, a requirement? What is there? And the honest answer is we're still looking into it. And maybe there's things that need to happen to make that mandatory, because the truth is it's not there, right? And everybody is disparate in the sense of what standards do they follow? Do they even have the budget to afford it, right? They're going to choose functionality over security. You'll find IG, GAO reports, others of different agencies that have had privacy concerns and others. And so, beyond, the stick method, well, what's the requirement, right? Not just because we should do it, but because we need to for the mission and others. So.
On that, and I know we only have just a couple of minutes, I'll ask you to leave us with, there's a fair amount of mandates and operational directives and other things that are out there relative to mobile. If you had to pick a couple for the audience and folks listening and watching today, which ones should they pay in particular close attention to, or closer attention to than maybe some of the others? Is it 2201, which I think, as you referenced earlier, the logging requirements, or 2131 with respect to EDR and sort of just endpoint broad strokes. I think there's some FISMA guidance or some other things out there. Which ones would you highlight for the audience to maybe take a closer look at?
So definitely the cyber executive order with the current administration and sort of the push towards zero trust. But what you may or may not see as directly is how that impacts mobile. So although I'll say look very closely at those things and look at what your enterprise population uses, right? I mean, we've been come March, this will be coming up on 2 years working from home and teleworking for COVID. And I will tell you, I'm a bad user of being in 2 meetings at once, because why? I can do it on Teams with my mobile device and then on my laptop with another, just so I can be more productive. But the truth is, we're using, the enterprise, the populace is using mobile devices. And so I will say that do take a look at the cyber executive order. Do take a look at how this is done, not only for your laptop devices, but your mobile devices, right? Aspects of knowing what you have, hardware, software, asset management, and configuring it and doing policy enforcement, but then doing things like mobile application management and vetting, doing things like endpoint protection, right? EDR for mobile, right? But that would be, in my opinion, humble opinion, is mobile threat defense, right? Or other, maybe there's a new technology that we haven't come up with yet. But the idea is there's things you can do with existing technologies to manage the device, know what you have, to protect the device. If that's an argument of should I know what I have and should I protect it, then I don't know what to say at that point. I just go read some NIST docs and some other, we had a report in 2017, right? A DHS study on mobile device security that we did. The threat's real, the threat's there. What you choose to do about it, zero trust is great, but how we choose to move there incrementally, I think, is going to be really key. And honestly, like I said, figure out what your populace is using. If there's no mobile devices, great, then don't protect it because you don't have anything to protect. But if you are using it, then okay, do you have a plan, right? How are you budgeting for it? Or what are you actually doing to make that possible? And no, it'll take time. You're not going to get there overnight, but you should still strive for it. So.
Well, on that note, I'll amplify the threat is there. The threat is real. Vince, thank you so much for your time today and your insightful thoughts and comments. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure the audience does as well. So with that, thanks and have a great day, everyone. And we'll turn it back over to Kirsten.